It didn't come from a press conference, a leaked document, or a carefully staged interview. It came from someone close, someone fans rarely hear from, and it landed with a kind of weight that instantly changes how people read everything that came before. This week, a remark linked to Moon Ga-young's family began circulating online. And within hours it had fans asking the same unsettling question: if this is not a coincidence, then what exactly have we been missing about Cha Eun-woo all along? The reason it's causing such a stir isn't just the wording, it's the timing. Coming when both stars are already under intense public attention. The comment has reignited old theories, revived forgotten moments, and sent social media into a familiar frenzy of screenshots, translations, and connect the dots threads. But here's what's making people pause: the statement didn't sound like a casual fan reaction. It sounded like someone correcting the record, subtly, carefully, without saying everything outright. So what did Moon Ga-young's family actually imply? And why is it suddenly forcing fans to re-examine Cha Eun-woo's story from a completely different angle? A short line, passed from one account to another. A clipped screenshot with no context. A translation thread that grew faster than anyone could verify. At first, it looked like typical fandom noise, the kind of someone said something whisper that flares up for a day and disappears when the next headline arrives. But this one didn't disappear. Because the words didn't read like fan talk. They didn't sound like playful teasing or vague admiration. They sounded deliberate. Like a correction. Like a subtle warning. Like someone close to the center of the story had finally decided to nudge the public away from a narrative that had gone too far. And the phrase that lit the fuse was painfully simple. Not a coincidence. Fans have spent years turning coincidences into theories, matching timestamps, comparing outfits, drawing lines between social media posts like detectives building a case. So when a remark tied to Moon Ga-young's family used the exact language fandom culture lives on, people didn't treat it as casual. They treated it like a signal. Within hours, the tone online shifted from curiosity to tension. Because this wasn't just about two celebrities sharing an industry space. It wasn't the usual "are they close, or did they interact?" speculation that cycles through entertainment pages. The questions became sharper, more unsettling. Why would family members, people who rarely step into the spotlight, say anything at all? Why now? And why use words that sound like they were pushing back against a version of the story that's already circulating? Then came the second wave: timing. Comment didn't emerge in a vacuum. It surfaced when public attention was already high, when every new appearance, interview, or scheduling rumor was being magnified and reinterpreted. Moments like that, even harmless details get weaponized into proof. A smile becomes a message. A polite compliment becomes a clue. A shared industry event becomes a conspiracy board. So when the family-linked remark appeared at this exact moment, fans didn't ask if it mattered. They assumed it did. They only argued about what it meant. Some said it was protective, an attempt to shield Moon Ga-young from being dragged into speculation that wasn't hers. Others believed it was the opposite, a quiet confirmation that something behind the scenes had been misunderstood, and that the public had been connecting the wrong dots. But the most intense reactions came from the same uneasy realization. Family comments don't just appear for fun. They appear when someone is tired of watching a story unfold incorrectly. And that's what made the atmosphere feel so charged. Because for years, Cha Eun-woo has been one of the most carefully managed public figures in the industry: polite, composed, famously measured. He gives fans warmth without giving them access. He smiles without letting the smile become a promise. He is, by design, difficult to read. When the internet began whispering that Moon Ga-young's family had revealed the truth about him, the fascination wasn't purely romantic. It was bigger than that. It was about the idea that someone outside the PR machinery, someone with no reason to perform, might have hinted at something the public narrative had never captured. Naturally, the clip culture took over. Screenshots multiplied. Translations battled each other. Context was argued like law. Every punctuation mark became evidence. People began digging through old interviews as if they contained hidden codes. A harmless throwaway line from years ago suddenly looked loaded when read next to "not a coincidence." And yet, even as the frenzy grew, something else happened, something quieter but more telling. Major accounts that usually rush to amplify rumors hesitated. Not all of them, of course, but enough that fans noticed. A few posts were deleted. Some captions were softened. Confirmed turned into allegedly. Family revealed turned into family-linked comment. That caution only poured gasoline on the fire. Because caution implies risk. And risk implies there's something real enough to cause consequences. Then came the third wave, the re-examination. Fans began revisiting old moments with new eyes, moments that had always been debated but never settled. On-screen interactions. Shared interviews where the energy felt unusually careful. Instances where one name was mentioned and the other person's response shifted, just slightly. A glance held too long. That arrived too late. A respectful compliment delivered with an odd precision. Like someone avoiding the wrong phrasing. To the outside world, it might look like nothing. To fandom, nothing is where everything hides. What truly raised the tension wasn't the fan analysis. It was the feeling that the story had moved out of the usual rumor lane and into a more fragile space, where real people could be affected. Because if Moon Ga-young's family did comment, that implies discomfort. It implies something about the narrative had grown sharp enough to reach home. And if the comment was meant to redirect attention toward Cha Eun-woo, that introduces an even more volatile possibility, that the public may have misunderstood his role in a situation fans think they already understand. And that brings us back to the most unsettling part. The remark didn't add details. It didn't explain. It didn't spill anything in a clean, quote-ready way. It only did one thing, one powerful, dangerous thing. It suggested the dots people have been connecting are not random. That implication is exactly what keeps a scandal alive. Not facts, implications. Confirmations, signals. By the end of the day, the question wasn't is this true? The question was, why would anyone close to Moon Ga-young risk stirring this at all, unless there was something they wanted people to stop getting wrong? And if that's the case, exactly are fans about to notice next? Once the phrase "not a coincidence" took hold, the internet did what it always does when it smells a hidden story. It built a map. Not a clean one. Not a reliable one. But a map made of timestamps, resurfaced clips, translated captions, and one dangerously persuasive idea, that a single comment had just turned a collection of maybe moments into something that might have a pattern. The first thing fans hunted for wasn't proof. Consistency. They went back to the same old clips that had sparked debates before, interactions that once felt harmless, then became suspicious only in hindsight. This time, people weren't watching for chemistry. They were watching for restraint, the kind of careful distance that feels intentional rather than accidental. The kind that suggests two people aren't simply coexisting in the same industry, but navigating a shared context with rules. And the more people watched, the more they focused on the smallest shifts. Second pause before answering a name. A laugh that didn't reach the eyes. A compliment phrased with surgical precision. As if the speaker knew exactly which words could be weaponized later. Under normal circumstances, those details mean nothing. The pressure of a viral rumor cycle. They become a language. Then the map narrowed. Threads began pointing toward one specific window of time, a period fans claimed explains why the comment surfaced now. The timeline wasn't presented as fact, but as a theory, that something had shifted behind the scenes recently, causing the old narrative to resurface with new urgency. And that's when the tone online changed again. Stop being playful. When speculation stays in the shipping lane, it's loud but light. People believe there's a reason a family member stepped near the conversation. The mood turns sharp, protective, sometimes aggressive. Fandom split, not into yes and no, to warring interpretations of intent. Was the comment meant to protect Moon Ga-young? Or was it meant to correct a rumor involving Cha Eun-woo? Or was it aimed at the audience, warning them to stop reading the wrong story into the wrong moments? Each interpretation came with its own evidence boards. Screenshots were circled. Captions were frozen mid-frame. People compared translations like lawyers cross-examining a witness. And the more the public argued, the clearer one uncomfortable truth became. No one actually knew the full context. Which is exactly what made it addictive. Because incomplete information invites imagination, and imagination is faster than fact. Meanwhile, a quieter thread began growing underneath the loud ones, Cha Eun-woo's recent behavior. Not in a gotcha sense. In a pattern sense. Fans claimed he seemed more guarded lately, more careful with phrasing, more direct in redirecting personal questions. Selective about what he reacts to publicly. Some pointed to moments where he appeared to acknowledge the noise without naming it, a firm smile, A clean boundary. Or that politely refused to feed a narrative. Again, none of this proves anything. But in a rumor storm, tone becomes evidence. Silence becomes evidence. Neutrality becomes evidence. Then came the strangest development of all. People started watching for absence. Who didn't mention whom? Which questions weren't asked? Which interviews avoided certain names entirely? Which accounts posted quickly, then deleted? Absence is a powerful tool in modern celebrity culture because it can't be easily fact-checked. It creates a vacuum. And a vacuum gets filled. And that vacuum grew larger when fan translators began emphasizing a particular nuance in the family-linked remark, less about romance, more about misinterpretation. Not "you're right." Getting it wrong. Not "there's a secret." But "there's a reason you don't understand." That reframed everything. Because if the comment was a correction, then the truth fans thought they were chasing might not be what they imagined. Might not be romantic at all. It might be something messier: context, boundaries, misunderstandings, or a narrative that has spiraled beyond anyone's control. That possibility made the tension worse, not better. Romantic theories have an easy payoff: confirmation or denial. A context theory has no payoff at all, only complexity. And complexity is terrifying to a fandom that has been trained to expect clean endings. As the frenzy peaked, fans began calling for restraint, reminding others that family and truth are two words that can do real damage if used irresponsibly. Others pushed harder, showing that the industry survives on hidden stories and that not a coincidence was practically an invitation. But the most chilling reactions weren't the loud ones. The ones that sounded certain. Posts that didn't speculate wildly, but instead insisted that people close to the situation had been hinting for a long time. That the public had been watching the wrong clues. The real story wasn't on camera, it was in the way certain things were handled off camera. Those claims spread fast because they offered what the internet loves most: the promise of an unseen truth. And once that promise exists, every new development gets dragged into its gravity. A schedule update becomes suspicious. Backstage photo becomes a clue. A neutral quote becomes a coded message. The rumor doesn't need facts anymore, it needs momentum. By the end of the second wave, one thing was obvious. Comment had done its job, whatever that job was. It pulled attention toward a question people weren't asking clearly enough before. If this really is not a coincidence, what is the coincidence hiding? And what, exactly, are people about to misread next, unless someone finally says the part they've been avoiding? By the time the rumor cycle reached its loudest point, people thought they were chasing a romantic twist. Because the truth implied by the family-linked comment wasn't about secret dating, hidden chemistry, or a forbidden storyline the public never got to see. It was something far more unexpected, far more human, and that's exactly why it hit so hard when the full context began to surface. According to the way the comment was described by those circulating it, a coincidence wasn't meant to tease fans. It was meant to stop them from misreading the situation. Mark, quiet but deliberate, was framed less like a reveal and more like a correction, a reminder that the connection people kept reducing to gossip had roots that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with character. And then the detail that changed the entire narrative began to spread. The coincidences fans had been obsessing over, timing overlaps, shared spaces, polite mentions, were allegedly tied to a far more private reality. Cho Eun-woo had been quietly involved in a moment that mattered to Moon Ga-young's family long before the internet decided to turn their names into a trending topic. Not publicly. Not for cameras. Not for headlines. Privately. The truth, as the story was framed, wasn't that the two stars were hiding something glamorous. It was that Cho Eun-woo had reportedly done something small enough to stay invisible, and meaningful enough that a family member couldn't watch it get twisted into gossip anymore. A helping hand offered without an announcement. Support given without credit. A gesture that wasn't designed to be noticed, until people started getting it wrong. That is why the phrase "not a coincidence" struck differently once the pieces were placed in the right order. Because it suggested the overlap wasn't random. And it wasn't romantic bait, it was the aftermath of something that had already happened off camera. Something that made the family view him in a particular way, not as a headline partner, but as someone who had shown up when it counted. And that's where the tension peaked. Because if that's the real context, storm online becomes something uglier, A situation where a private act of kindness gets dragged into public speculation and reshaped into fantasy. It becomes a story where the internet is arguing over romance, while the people closest to the truth are thinking about gratitude, respect, and boundaries. The alleged family link tone wasn't excited. It was firm. It carried the energy of someone saying, "Stop turning this into something it isn't. You're missing the point." That also explains why so many observers felt the comment read like a correction rather than a tease. Because when someone's family speaks, even indirectly, it's rarely to entertain strangers. It's usually because something has crossed a line. This narrative. The line wasn't dating rumors. It was misinterpretation. Misinterpretation that threatened to cheapen something private and meaningful. The real reveal wasn't a relationship, it was a reputation. Here's the twist that made fans not ready in the truest sense. The family link truth shifted the spotlight away from romance entirely and toward Cha Eun-woo's character, the part the public can't easily package into edits and theories. It reframed him not as someone hiding a secret, but as someone who, by staying quiet, had allowed others to fill the silence with the wrong story. And once that wrong story started pulling Moon Ga-young's family into it, the correction came out. Not to confirm a ship, to protect the truth from being misused. That's why the phrase "not a coincidence" landed like a warning. Because it implied, yes, there is a reason these names keep crossing the same space, just not the reason you want. Why this changes everything. Rumor culture, people expect payoffs, a denial, a confirmation, a scandal. Reveal that ends the guessing game. But this kind of truth doesn't end anything neatly. It complicates the narrative. It forces fans to consider that the loudest interpretation might be the least accurate. And it introduces an uncomfortable question the internet doesn't like answering. The connection was based on something private and respectful. Why did we turn it into entertainment? That's why the story felt explosive even without a scandalous detail. Because the reveal doesn't feed fantasies, it challenges them. It turns the coincidence into something heavier. Reminder that not everything public overlap is romantic. Every silence is a tease. Sometimes, silence is protection. And sometimes, the people closest to a story speak up, not to reveal a secret romance, but to stop the world from disrespecting something real. That's what makes everyone keep watching Cha Eun-woo after this, not because a ship sailed, but because a line was drawn between curiosity and carelessness. And once that line is visible, you can't unsee it. In the end, the most explosive part of this not a coincidence moment wasn't a scandal, it was a correction. Because once the narrative shifted, everything looked different, the clips, the timelines, the hints people swore were proof. What fans thought was a puzzle to solve suddenly felt like a warning sign, reminding everyone how quickly a human moment can be flattened into a rumor, then repeated until it becomes truth simply because it's loud. If the family-linked comment did anything, it wasn't to feed speculation. To pull attention back to something the internet often forgets: real people live behind those names. Their relationships, professional, personal, respectful, aren't content. And when fans turn every overlap into a headline, don't just misread the story, they risk damaging the very people they claim to support. Maybe that's why the phrase hit so sharply. Not a coincidence didn't mean you were right. And you were looking at the wrong reason. And now the question isn't whether fans can find the next clue. It's whether they can recognize the line, before the next coincidence becomes another excuse to cross it. Thank you for reading. If this story stayed with you, share it for the message, not the rumors. And if you ever catch yourself turning silence into evidence, let this be the reminder: sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is stop, step back, and let people keep what's private, private.